you are wasting your life. And the scariest part, you may not even realize it. Tell me, how many times have you found yourself repeating old habits, living the same grey days as if you were stuck in an endless cycle? How many times have you woken up feeling late, as if you were trying to achieve something you don't even know what it is? If this restlessness has knocked on your door, then this video is for you. Today, I'm not here just to motivate you, I'm here to guide you, as your mentor, as someone who has gone from absolute nothingness to the top of the financial world, facing pressure, difficult choices, and the constant temptation to waste the most precious thing you have, your life. What I'm about to reveal to you aren't tips, they're cuts. Deep, decisive cuts into the illusions that keep you broken. Today, I'm going to show you the 7 things I gave up to stop being just another person in the world, and become a millionaire forged in discipline, clarity, and intelligent sacrifice. But first, you need to understand this. Wealth doesn't start in the bank. It starts in your head. You won't build an empire while you're a slave to your impulses, while you still care about the opinions of people who don't even know where you want to go, while you use your energy to defend yourself instead of using it to create, while you continue to seek comfort instead of purpose. Yes, I started from the bottom, counting pennies, and yet, even at rock bottom, I was certain of one thing. My time would not be wasted. Every decision, every routine, every person I interacted with, everything was part of the process. Everything had to make sense. It was in this spirit that I had to let go of the first thing, the vanity of appearing busy. How many people do you know who are always saying they don't have time, that they don't have room in their schedule, but remain poor, frustrated, emotionally unbalanced? This disorganized rush is just a trap. I learned early on that what builds wealth is not being busy. It's being focused. I traded hustle for strategic execution, while others rushed to meetings. I was quiet, studying numbers. While others networked for ego, I was cultivating purposeful alliances. While many prided themselves on working 16 hours a day, I asked myself how many of those hours were truly productive. That's how I learned to measure my life, by impact, not effort. And that changes everything. If you still measure your worth by how tired you are, you're still stuck in the logic of scarcity. You're still being exploited, emotionally or financially. And I tell you, coldly and clearly, this has to end today. The second thing I had to give up, and perhaps the most difficult, was my addiction to approval. The need to be understood, to be accepted, to be applauded by family, friends, colleagues. But let's face it, no one builds an empire by asking for permission. When you depend on someone else's okay to act, you are outsourcing your life. You are asking other people to tell you who you can be. I had to let go of that early on, even from people I loved. Because the truth is, the people who will try hardest to stop you from growing are the ones who know you as you are today. They will remind you of your failures, your mistakes, your limitations. They will tell you to not dream so big, and not because they hate you, but because they don't want to lose the version of you that doesn't threaten them. That's why I say, if you want to thrive, learn to disappoint small expectations. Choose your greatness over the cheap affection of those who don't want to grow. The third thing I left behind was immediate pleasure, disguised as reward. Chocolate after a hard day, TV shows to relax, shopping to treat myself. I lived all of that, and I realized it was a prison, disguised as affection. The more I rewarded myself for the little things, the less energy I had to achieve the big things. And so, I made a pact. I will only allow myself pleasure when there is progress. It's not about living like a martyr. It's about understanding that pleasure that impoverishes you is not pleasure, it's anesthesia. And you can't build your future while anesthetized. You need to be awake. You need to learn to love the discomfort of building. Today, every little luxury I allow myself carries meaning, because it didn't come from impulsiveness. It came from consistency, and that changes the taste of everything. Right now, you may be reviewing your habits, your patterns, your routine. And that's exactly what I want to provoke in you. Because, without that discomfort, there is no transformation. So tell me, what are you still carrying that you should have left behind? What behavior is still stealing your days and you pretend not to notice? Comment below which of these 3 truths hit you the hardest. Say it out loud. I abandon this starting today. And declare your turnaround. There was a silent enemy. I needed to eliminate the belief that I was special. It may seem contradictory, right? You hear all the time that you need to value yourself, believe in yourself, think you're unique. But I'm going to tell you something that transformed my life, and that may irritate you at first. The belief that you are too special is keeping you poor. Do you know why? Because people who feel too special believe they deserve something just for existing. They believe that, somehow, life owes them something. And that's where the danger lies. You start to justify your stagnation by saying, I just haven't prospered yet, because the world hasn't recognized me. As if you were just waiting to be discovered. As if you were an unrecognized genius. But the reality of the world is cold. No one is coming to discover you. No one is going to knock on your door, offering you an empire. No one will see your hidden potential if you don't turn it into visible results. And worse, this delusional belief puts you in a waiting position. You live as if you were a rare jewel, forgotten on a dusty shelf, hoping that someone will understand you. When, in fact, you should be forging steel with your own hands. In the heat of discipline and sacrifice, that's when I realized that I stopped looking for special opportunities and started creating consistent opportunities. While others dreamed of luck, I built structure. While many waited to be noticed, I dedicated myself to becoming undeniable, because, you see, true wealth isn't a matter of deserving it. It's a matter of structured repetition over time. And that's available to anyone who has the courage to let go of the pride of thinking they're special. True freedom comes when you understand you're not special, but you can become extraordinary. That understanding set me free, and that's when I had to face another subtle poison, the silent comparison. How many times have you logged onto social media and felt that twinge? Someone traveling, someone else shopping, someone else celebrating, and you, on the other side of the screen, with a mixture of, I want that, and why don't I have that yet? No need to answer. I know, because I've been there too. Even before the digital age, my environment was full of men growing, closing deals, thriving while I was still organizing spreadsheets by hand, counting coins, making detailed accounting records, and deep down, that voice, you're behind, John. You'll never get there. They're better. But I learned to silence that voice with a hard and definitive truth. The race is mine. The track is mine. The time is mine. I cut off the comparison like someone cutting off a rotten root that was sucking the energy out of my growth, because, understand this, when you compare yourself, you distance yourself. You move away from your original identity. You abandon your unique journey. And worse, you adopt goals that are not yours. You start chasing someone else's car, without realizing that your road was leading to a different destination. That's why I gave up comparison. And in its place, I installed the only parameter that matters. Am I more disciplined today than I was yesterday? If so, I'm winning. If not, I need to adjust. Now pay attention to this. This rule may seem simple, but it requires brutal honesty. Because it takes the focus off the outside world and puts the spotlight directly on your conscience. It forces you to stop pointing fingers and start taking action. And it was this same logic that led me to abandon the sixth thing. Distractions that seemed harmless. You might say, but John, I need rest too. Yes, but what you call rest is often just escapism in disguise. How many times do you say you're relaxing when you're really just procrastinating in style? TV, series, social media, endless scrolling, notifications, empty conversations, all of these are mental sedatives. And you can't build wealth while sedated. You need to be awake, whole, active. I did a rigorous experiment on myself. For every hour wasted, I counted it as $1 lost, but with one detail. It wasn't just $1 now. It was $1 multiplied by years, with compound interest, missed opportunities, businesses that ceased to exist. $1 lost in the present means thousands lost in the future. The human mind needs space to create. But not just any space, it needs space with direction. So I started building days with protected blocks, sacred hours of uninterrupted execution, armored routines. I woke up early, with purpose. I went to sleep with a review, and most importantly, I said no to everything that didn't move me forward, even if it was uncomfortable, even if it hurt those who didn't understand. Are you willing to do the same? Because that brings me to the last thing I gave up, the rush to get rich. Listen carefully. Rush is the disguise of insecurity. Those who are in a hurry to get rich are afraid of not succeeding, and those who act out of fear make stupid decisions. They make impulsive bets. They associate with the wrong people. They invest where they don't understand. They buy promises instead of building foundations. Haste destroys fortunes faster than any crisis. What saved me was cultivating a virtue that seems old-fashioned, but is the foundation of all lasting wealth: strategic patience. I'm not talking about passivity. I'm talking about relentless focus over time. While many sought immediate profits, I studied cycles. While others wanted to double their earnings in a quarter, I was preparing my profits to sustain generations. I didn't rush to get rich. I walked to consolidate, and that difference made me not just a millionaire but a free man. You see, you're not here just to pay bills and survive. You were created with a divine capacity for creation. But to do that, you need to cut the old, cut the fragile, cut the useless. Now that you know the 7 renunciations that set me free, tell me, which one do you need to practice today? Which of these chains are you still carrying on your feet without realizing it? Comment now. I cut it off. It's simple, it's symbolic, but it's powerful. It's your mind telling the world that a new construction has begun. Understand this. Cutting off what holds you back is only half the battle. What really transforms you is what you decide to build in its place. It's what you plant in the clean soil that was once contaminated. That's why a relentless phase begins here, the building phase. And the first thing that needs to be built is your emotional discipline. You can master numbers, you can learn to negotiate, you can accumulate capital. But if you don't master your emotions, it will all slip through your fingers. Because the real world, business, money, the market, all of it is a battlefield. And those who enter the war emotionally fragile will fall in the first shots. When I started my journey, I was just another guy with fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. But I understood that my emotions couldn't guide my decisions. So I started treating them for what they are: signals, not commands. If I felt fear, I interpreted it as a warning, not as an order to retreat. If I felt anger, I used it as energy to execute, not as an excuse to explode. If I felt sadness, I immersed myself in silence and analysis, not in self-pity. You don't have to be cold, but you do need to be firm. You need to have a mind that feels but does not bend. Self-control is the foundation of wealth, because only it prevents you from destroying on impulse what took years to build with discipline. And do you know what the first test of this discipline is? The use of your time. If you still live saying, "I don't have time," you are still unconscious. You don't need more time. You need more structure. Time is fair to everyone. What changes is not the amount we have, but the clarity with which we use it. That's why one of the first habits I implemented, even when I was earning pocket money, was to record how I spent every hour of my day. I wrote it down, I calculated it, I analyzed it, and I soon realized there was more wealth in the hours I wasted than in the money I earned. That's when I created a principle that I still follow today. Every hour must yield more than it costs. It's that simple. If an hour of conversation doesn't produce results, it's discarded. If an hour of screen time doesn't generate insight, it's eliminated. If an hour of meeting doesn't lead to a decision, it's reconfigured. And this isn't about being robotic. It's about understanding that whoever controls time controls destiny. The opposite is also true. Whoever wastes time wastes their own life. And it was by controlling time that I learned to build something even more powerful. The builder's mindset. This is the difference between those who live on a salary and those who build a legacy. Between those who consume and those who build. Between those who dream and those who execute. The builder's mindset says the following. Every action I take must generate something lasting. Something that will yield results. When I am no longer here, something that can be repeated, scaled, replicated. That's why I stopped trading time for money, and I started trading structure for income. I started creating systems, processes, operations. Every small success was documented. Every failure was refined. Every routine was polished until it became a predictable results machine. Do you understand what that means? It means that while many people only make money when they work, I started making money while I slept. Because the work I did once continued to produce. Because the store continued to sell. Because the operation continued to run. Because the processes no longer depended on me, they depended on well-applied principles. And that's the point that most people ignore. You won't get rich as long as you're needed for everything. You'll only truly prosper when your presence is no longer mandatory, when your operation breathes on its own, when your effort becomes a system, when your energy is applied not to maintain but to scale. This requires a type of effort that few people are willing to make, because at first it seems slow, it seems lonely. It seems too much work. But I tell you, nothing is more laborious than spending your whole life putting out fires. Nothing is more tiring than always depending on yourself. Nothing is riskier than being irreplaceable. Build something that works without you. And only then, start thinking about expansion. That's why I've never been seduced by appearances. I never cared about the car of the year, the luxury watch, the trendy dinners. While others spent money to look rich, I built to be free. And that freedom didn't come from a brilliant idea. It came from the relentless combination of three factors: emotional discipline, time management, and a builder's mindset. With that, you can not only escape poverty, you can build a fortress, an empire, a life that no one can take away from you. Now, stop for a moment, breathe, look at your routine today, and tell me, what part of it is being built to last? What part is generating returns, even when you stop? What part is being done with a 10, 20, or 30-year vision? If the answer is none, then you're not building. You're just surviving. And I invite you now, at this very moment, to turn the key. Take on the identity of a builder. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter how much you have. The building starts now. Most people live trying to earn more. But very few understand the game-changing truth. You don't get rich from what you earn. You get rich from what you keep. And that's why, after abandoning distractions, taking control of my time, and strengthening my emotional discipline, my next step was to implement a personal culture of maximum efficiency. And when I talk about efficiency, I'm not just talking about productivity. I'm talking about surgical precision in how you use resources. Money, time, energy, focus, relationships. These are all resources. And every empire that stands is built on the principle of not wasting anything. Have you ever stopped to count how much of your daily energy is wasted on conversations that don't elevate you? On decisions that are repeated because they weren't done right the first time? On expenses that don't bring a return? It was when I started identifying every microleak in my life that I began to truly thrive. I wrote down every penny, every deviation, every repeated mistake, every underutilized resource. My philosophy was simple. Every dollar must have a function, every minute must have a purpose. If it doesn't, it's out. If it doesn't yield a return, it's restructured. You may find this extreme, but think about it. Companies that grow are those that know where every penny goes. They know the cost per acquisition, the return per campaign, the net profit per operation, and you? Do you know what you're taking out of or putting into your assets every month? If you don't, you're still playing around. And that brings us to the principle that underpins everything: data-driven decisions. You see, the modern world is driven by opinion, by likes, by feelings. But empires, real ones, are ruled by numbers, by facts, by constant analysis. And that was a turning point in my journey. I stopped making decisions based on guesswork and started building based on metrics. Before opening a new operation, I did the math. Before hiring, I evaluated projected performance. Before expanding, I analyzed scenarios. And you might say, but I don't have a team. I don't have the structure. And I say to you, that's exactly why you need to be even more precise. The fewer resources you have, the greater your efficiency must be. You can't afford to make many mistakes, so you need to decide based on data from the outset. With every expense, ask, what will this return? How soon? With what risk? With every decision, ask, does this bring me closer to my long-term vision or distract me with immediate gains? These questions change everything, because they take you out of the autopilot mode of scarcity and put you in the cockpit of conscious creation. But even with all these principles in place, life will test you. There will be crises, there will be losses, there will be market crashes, asset devaluations, capital shortages, and at that point many retreat. But here, you will apply what is perhaps the most powerful of all principles: growth in times of crisis. This is the difference between those who survive and those who dominate. Those who survive react. Those who dominate move forward. In a crisis, most people cut everything. They shrink, they freeze. I did the opposite. While everyone else was retreating, I reinvested. But be careful, I'm not talking about acting crazy. I'm talking about acting with vision. A crisis is the world's biggest asset liquidator. It is during a crisis that strong companies buy weak companies. It is during a crisis that real estate prices fall, that assets are auctioned off, that talent becomes available, that spaces open up. And I was ready for it. Because I prepared cash. Because I maintained reserves. Because I lived frugally. Because I cultivated vision when others were distracted by comfort. When everyone else was seeking stability, I was seeking positioning. And that is how, in every crisis, my presence in the market grew. While others were putting out fires, I was building new structures, and you can do the same. But you need to understand, you only grow in a crisis if you have roots before it. You need to have strong foundations, a lean operation, a protected reserve, a clear plan, and above all, the willingness to act when everyone else hesitates. Remember, the growth you achieve in a crisis is worth 3 times as much, because it comes with space, with less competition, with better conditions. That is why the most solid empires in history were built in the midst of war, recession, and scarcity. Scarcity doesn't destroy those who are prepared. It reveals them, and it promotes them. Now, take a breath. Look at everything we've talked about so far. You've abandoned emotional addictions. You've taken control of your time. You've implemented a builder's mindset. You've established maximum efficiency. You've started making decisions based on data. And you've learned to grow even in chaos. Do you see the kind of identity that is being forged? You are no longer a survivor. You are becoming a strategist, a founder, a commander of your own life. But all of this still needs one final thing to consolidate: a clear, long-term vision. And that is what we are going to prepare next. You can achieve anything. You can have emotional discipline, time management, efficient operations, growing profits. But if you don't have a spiritual foundation, none of it will last. Because what will sustain you in the dark days, in betrayals, in injustices, and even in days of abundance, will be the awareness that you are not here just to accumulate. You are here to transform. And I say this not as a religious person, but as someone who, throughout his life, has learned to see the invisible. Because only those who build a true empire understand that there is something greater at stake. You see, when I started out, I was driven by necessity. Then I was driven by ambition. But what kept me growing, even when I had more than any man needed, was something else, a sense of mission. The wealth that remains is that which carries purpose, that respects its origins, that honors its responsibility. You don't accumulate to show off. You accumulate to serve, to preserve, to protect, to lead, to multiply lives, not just numbers. And it was with this understanding that I developed a personal philosophy. Be generous in charity, but frugal in your personal life. I could have lived in luxury, but I chose simplicity, because I discovered that the simpler I lived, the clearer my mind became. And the clearer my mind, the more wealth I was able to build, but the more correct decisions I made, the more focus I preserved. Today, the world teaches you to spend on what shines, to live for what attracts attention, but I invite you to live for what builds, for what remains, for what strengthens you silently, without the need for validation. Frugality is not poverty, it is strategy, it is honor. It is a daily reminder that you are in control, not your impulses, and generosity. Yes, that should be abundant. But not just any generosity. I'm not talking about emotional handouts, I'm talking about strategic philanthropy. You need to understand, the capital you build is not just yours. It is leverage, a tool, a seed. And the more aware you are of the impact you can have, the more wisdom you will develop to protect and multiply what you have. That's why I created institutions, why I invested in education, why I supported science, health, and faith, because my mission was clear, to use my wealth as an extension of my leadership. And here's a secret that no one talks about. When your wealth is connected to a mission, it multiplies with less effort, because it no longer depends solely on you. It begins to be carried by purpose, by vision, by synergy with something greater. A mission protects you from boredom, from deviation, from corruption, and above all, from ego, because, yes, even after all that, you will still be tested by it. Ego whispers that you are better, that you no longer need to listen to anyone else, that you are now above the discipline that built you. And that is where many fall. Not in scarcity, but in abundance. Because they forget what brought them there. That is why I developed another silent practice. Leadership without ostentation. I made a point of remaining observant, of listening more than talking, of not becoming the man who needs to be flattered to feel important. My focus was on efficiency, not ego, results, not recognition. For me, leadership was about quietly empowering others, creating structures where people felt valued, where talent could flourish, where work made sense. And that is what I invite you to build. An empire that serves you, but does not depend solely on you. A system where your absence is not a tragedy, where your presence is leadership, not imposition. But none of this will be possible if you do not cultivate inner strength, because everything you are building will be tested. Crises will come. People you have helped will betray you. Partners will fail. The press will attack. Family members will doubt you. The market will fluctuate. Your health may falter, and in those moments, you will need something greater than data, structures, and profits. You will need faith. The faith that tells you, I was called to do this. The faith that affirms, what I am building serves a greater good. The faith that sustains you when everything seems to be falling apart. This faith can have many names. For me, it has always been connected to God. Not as a distant entity, but as a real force, present in every conscious decision I made. Before every important move, I prayed, silently, asking for wisdom, not just results. Asking for vision, not just opportunity. Asking for humility, not just power. And that's how I kept my feet on the ground, even when my fortune surpassed that of entire countries. Because, understand this, The greatest risk of wealth is not losing it. It is losing yourself within it. So, if there is one thing you need to prioritize above all else, it is building your identity, your character, your integrity. And this is something you do every day, silently, invisible to the eye, but decisive for everything that will come. So stop now and look inside yourself. You are building capital, but are you building soul? You are accumulating profits, but are you accumulating purpose? You are growing for the world, but are you growing inside? That is the difference between a rich man and an eternal man. And that is what I want you to become, an eternal builder. You understand how I replaced the vices of haste, comparison, ego, and distraction with structures, principles, operations, and vision. You learned that solid wealth is not made of secrets, but of sacrifices. It is not built with luck, but with awareness. It is not born from the desire to have, but from the decision to be. And I didn't tell you this just to inspire you. I told you this to call you to action. Are you ready to build a new cycle? Because now that you know, you can no longer claim ignorance, and everything you continue to do, if contrary to what you have heard here, will be a choice and no longer chance. Maybe you still doubt yourself. Maybe you still hear inner voices telling you that it's too late, that you don't have the structure, that your bills are overwhelming you, that your history condemns you. I understand. I heard those voices too. But it was precisely in those voices that I discovered my chance. Because understand this, scarcity is the best place to start. It forces you to see what is essential, to cut out the superfluous, to build firmly, to choose wisely. You don't need millions to start. You need a non-negotiable decision. When I was starting out, what I heard most was, take it easy. But I knew, easy is not passive. And I wasn't in a hurry. I had urgency with direction. I was hungry for structure. I was thirsty for solidity. And you need to awaken that urgency. Now, not to run, but to stop wasting time. Not to look for shortcuts, but to start digging the ground for your independence. Not to show anyone anything, but to prove to yourself that it is possible to be the man or woman you know you were born to be. Everything you need is here. Emotional discipline, a constructive mindset, time management, data-driven decisions, growth in crisis, applied spirituality, and a moral mission for wealth. The map is drawn. The path is lit, but the walk is yours alone. And the question I leave you with now is this: what will you build in the next 5 years? Not what you want, not what you dream of, but what are you willing to build with consistency, sacrifice, and vision? Because 5 years will pass, with or without crisis, with or without time, with or without money, with or without support, with or without clarity. They will pass, and you will get there. But where? Will you arrive with more excuses or more assets? With more guilt or more legacy? With more consumption or more structure? You decide. And if this video touched you, if it ignited that silent and unshakable strength within you, share it.